Ernest Edwin Evans was born in the rolling plains of Oklahoma in 1908, a child of resilience and quiet determination. His father was a proud Cherokee, his mother part Creek, and from them he inherited a strong sense of identity, a stubborn streak, and a fiery courage that would one day define his life. Growing up, he was fascinated by stories of warriors and explorers, men who faced danger head-on and refused to back down, and he felt a deep calling to serve his country in the only way he knew how, through the Navy. But it was not an easy path. When he first tried to join the Marine Corps, he was turned away. Some said it was because of his heritage, others because he simply did not fit the typical mold. Undeterred, Evans refused to accept defeat. If one door closed, he would find another. He set his sights on the U.S. Naval Academy, a challenge that would test him as much mentally as physically. 60 other applicants had already passed the entrance exam, but Evans outscored them all, a testament to his sharp mind, relentless work ethic, and extraordinary determination. He earned his place at the academy, stepping into a world of discipline, tradition, and expectation, where only the most capable could survive. Graduation came in 1931, and he emerged not only as an officer, but as a man ready to define his own destiny. In the years that followed, Evans proved himself in ways that would hint at the audacity and leadership he would later display in battle. He moved through the ranks, gaining experience, learning the intricacies of naval command, and cultivating a reputation as a man who would never shy away from danger. He became known for his directness, for his insistence that every man under his command understood exactly what was expected of him. By 1943, at the age of 35, he received his first destroyer command, a small ship compared to the giants of the fleet, but one that would become an extension of his own daring spirit. The destroyer, USS Johnston, was brand new, and Evans approached it not merely as a vessel, but as a weapon, a partner in the challenges he knew lay ahead. Standing on the deck for the first time, he addressed his crew with words that would echo through naval history. "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." There was no room for hesitation, no space for doubt. He was not asking for loyalty. He was demanding courage, a willingness to follow him wherever the fight led. Evans's leadership style was unusual but effective. He combined strict discipline with a personal touch, knowing the strengths and weaknesses of each sailor under his command. He inspired loyalty not through fear, but through respect. Men who served with him described a quiet confidence that could turn into sudden, explosive action when the situation demanded it. He was a man who calculated risks, yet embraced them, who understood the razor-thin line between life and death at sea. Even before the war fully engulfed the Pacific, Evans faced moments that tested him. In training exercises, he pushed his crew and his ship to the limits, simulating scenarios that would soon become reality. He demanded speed, precision, and unwavering focus. Every maneuver, every command was a rehearsal for the storm that would come. His obsession with readiness was not mere preparation. It was a belief that the unexpected would strike, and when it did, only those who had trained relentlessly could survive. It was not just his technical skill that made him exceptional. It was his unyielding will. Stories from his early life hint at the same fearless streak that would later define his legendary stand at the Battle off Samar. He was known to take on challenges others avoided, to make decisions that seemed reckless to outsiders, but were guided by an intuition honed through years of experience. Even in moments of quiet, his mind was calculating, always anticipating the next move, the next threat, the next opportunity. By the time USS Johnston slid into the waters of the Pacific, Evans had transformed from a determined young man from Oklahoma into a leader prepared to face one of the most impossible battles in naval history. He carried with him the weight of his heritage, the lessons of his upbringing, and the unshakable conviction that retreat was never an option. Every sailor on the Johnston understood this, even if they did not yet fully comprehend what it would mean. They knew that under Evans's command, their destroyer was more than a ship. It was a statement, a declaration that courage could defy overwhelming odds, and that even in the face of the largest fleet the world had ever seen, one man's resolve could inspire a fight that might seem impossible to win. As the Pacific War raged and the threat of Japanese forces loomed larger each day, Evans and his crew trained, drilled, and prepared, fully aware that their true test would come without warning. The danger could appear in the form of battleships larger than any destroyer, guns more powerful than any they had faced, and odds so stacked against them that most would have fled. But Evans did not retreat. His mind, honed by years of discipline, and his heart, strengthened by heritage and conviction, were already preparing for that moment, a moment when the name Ernest Evans would become inseparable from courage, sacrifice, and a legacy that would inspire generations. Even now, imagining the young man walking the deck of his ship, watching the horizon for the first signs of danger, it is clear that the making of a hero is never accidental. It is forged in early choices, in the stubborn refusal to accept limits, in the commitment to lead rather than follow, in the belief that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. This was the beginning of Ernest Evans's journey, a story that would soon reach heights of audacity and valor few could have imagined, a journey that started in the quiet plains of Oklahoma and was destined to collide with history in the most extraordinary way.
By 1943, the USS Johnston had become more than just a collection of steel and machinery. Under Ernest Evans' command, it was a symbol of daring, a small destroyer with a crew whose loyalty and courage were matched only by the audacity of their captain. The Johnston was brand new, part of a class of ships designed for speed, agility, and versatility, yet in comparison to the battleships and cruisers that roamed the Pacific, it was modest, just over 2,100 tons, a fraction of the size of the massive Japanese vessels that would soon confront it. Still, in the hands of Evans, it would become a formidable weapon, capable of striking fear into an enemy that underestimated the audacity of a man willing to risk everything. From the moment he took command, Evans established a tone that left no doubt about what life aboard the Johnston would be like. He did not sugarcoat danger. He did not make promises of safety. Instead, he demanded absolute commitment. The words he spoke to his crew on that first day aboard the deck set the stage for everything that followed. "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." There was no room for hesitation, no middle ground. Those who stayed aboard knew that Evans' definition of leadership meant facing the storm head-on, whatever the odds. Evans quickly earned a reputation for both strictness and fairness. He knew the strengths and weaknesses of every sailor under his command and pushed each one to operate at the highest level. Training aboard the Johnston was relentless. Drills simulated every conceivable scenario, from evasive maneuvers to torpedo attacks, from anti-aircraft defense to night combat. Evans demanded speed, precision, and flawless coordination. Errors were not tolerated because in combat, even a single mistake could be fatal. Yet while the discipline was strict, his crew respected him immensely. They understood that his expectations were not arbitrary. They were the difference between survival and destruction. Life aboard the Johnston was intense. The crew lived in tight quarters, the ship itself a maze of corridors, gun turrets, and engine rooms, each space humming with the energy of preparation. Evans made it clear that every sailor, whether officer or deckhand, had a critical role to play. Morale was maintained not through speeches, but through trust and confidence. The men believed in Evans because he believed in them, because he had proven time and again that he would be the first to face danger and the last to abandon his ship. Stories from this period describe Evans walking the deck at all hours, inspecting equipment, encouraging his crew, and mentally rehearsing every scenario, as if he already knew the battle that was coming. The Johnston itself was a marvel of naval engineering for its size. Its sleek lines, powerful engines, and nimble design made it capable of maneuvers impossible for larger vessels. But its most powerful asset was its crew, trained to exploit every advantage. They learned to fire with accuracy under duress, to repair damage at lightning speed, and to anticipate enemy tactics before they happened. The destroyer could not match a battleship in firepower, but Evans knew that audacity, surprise, and precision could level the playing field. Every drill, every exercise was designed to prepare them for the day when they would face overwhelming odds, a day that would come sooner than anyone imagined. As the months passed, the Johnston patrolled the waters of the Pacific, escorting convoys, engaging in skirmishes, and learning the brutal rhythm of war at sea. Evans remained at the center of every operation, his presence a steadying force in a chaotic environment. He understood the psychology of combat as well as the mechanics of warfare. A confident crew could accomplish feats that a hesitant one could not, and he worked tirelessly to instill courage, focus, and unity. The sailors trusted him not only with their lives, but with the belief that even the most impossible task could be faced with determination and skill. Evans' approach to leadership was unconventional in many ways. He valued initiative, encouraging his junior officers and crew to think quickly, act decisively, and adapt to changing circumstances. He emphasized the importance of timing, movement, and calculated risk. In Evans' mind, the destroyer was more than metal and guns. It was a living system, a team whose effectiveness depended on the cohesion, trust, and resolve of its members. And in moments of calm between patrols, Evans would talk to his crew about courage, about the honor of service, and about the responsibility each sailor bore for one another. These conversations were not speeches, they were lessons in character, shaping the mindset of men who would soon be tested in ways they could not yet imagine. Despite the intensity of life aboard the Johnston, Evans never lost sight of the bigger picture. He was keenly aware that the war in the Pacific was escalating, that the Japanese Navy still possessed battleships far larger and more powerful than his destroyer, and that one day he and his crew might face a force so overwhelming that survival would seem impossible. Yet he also knew that audacity could be a weapon, that courage could create opportunities where others saw only defeat. He instilled this mindset in every member of the Johnston, preparing them not just to follow orders, but to act decisively, even when the outcome was uncertain. By the summer of 1944, the USS Johnston and her crew had become finely tuned instruments of naval warfare. They were prepared for convoy protection, for skirmishes with enemy ships, and for daring attacks against forces that far outgunned them. Yet nothing in their training fully prepared them for the challenge that awaited at Leyte Gulf. Evans had led them to the brink, tested their limits, and cultivated a trust that was about to be tested in the extreme circumstances imaginable. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become legendary, a clash where a small destroyer and a determined captain would face a fleet far larger, and where courage, skill, and audacity would be the only weapons capable of turning the tide. In many ways, Evans and the Johnston were already writing history long before they engaged the enemy. The ship had become an extension of its captain's character, bold, relentless, and fearless. The crew had internalized Evans' philosophy that honor required risk, that survival demanded skill, and that leadership meant standing firm even when every rational calculation suggested retreat. As they patrolled the Pacific, scanning the horizon for threats, each sailor carried the unspoken understanding that the moments to come would define not just their lives, but the legacy of every man and every ship that dared to face impossible odds. The Johnston was ready, and so was Ernest Evans. Together, they represented the culmination of years of training, preparation, and determination. The battles ahead would demand everything they had, testing courage, leadership, and ingenuity. But if there was one certainty amidst the uncertainty of war, it was this. Under Evans' command, the USS Johnston would never hesitate, never retreat, and would meet whatever challenge came with unwavering resolve. The crew understood it, and so did the captain. In the weeks to come, the Pacific would witness an audacious stand that would echo through history, a battle where courage defied the overwhelming odds, and where one man's resolve would inspire heroism beyond imagination. By October 1944, the Philippines had become the stage for one of the largest naval confrontations in history. The U.S. was preparing to liberate Leyte, and the Japanese Navy, determined to halt the invasion, had assembled its most powerful fleet ever. Known as the Center Force and commanded by Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, this armada included 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, and 11 destroyers, with the mighty Yamato at its core. At 72,000 tons and armed with 18-inch guns, the Yamato alone could obliterate any ship that came into its path. The Japanese fleet had firepower unmatched, a force that seemed unstoppable on paper, and yet fate was about to place it against an American task unit that could barely hope to survive. The Americans had strategically deployed Task Unit Taffy 3 to guard the San Bernardino Strait. It was a makeshift force, 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. These escort carriers were designed for support, not frontline battle. Their thin armor offered almost no protection against the massive shells of Japanese battleships, and their planes were primarily intended for anti-submarine patrols rather than fleet engagement. The destroyers and destroyer escorts could only fire effectively at much closer range, putting them at a severe disadvantage. In terms of size, firepower, and armor, the odds were staggering, 4-1, favoring the Japanese. Yet even in the face of these impossible odds, Taffy 3 would soon find itself in a confrontation that would become legendary. The moment of vulnerability came because of Admiral William Bull Halsey's decision to chase a decoy northern force of Japanese carriers. Halsey's forces moved north, leaving the San Bernardino Strait unguarded, creating a deadly gap in the American defense. Kurita's center force, previously assumed to be contained or retreating, seized this opportunity. By the morning of October 25, 1944, his fleet emerged from the strait completely unopposed, heading straight for the weak American units defending Leyte. The encounter was entirely unexpected, and the men of Taffy 3 had mere minutes to comprehend the scale of the threat bearing down on them. Imagine the perspective of the sailors aboard those escort carriers, looking through binoculars across miles of open water. On the horizon, enormous silhouettes began to appear, battleships the size of small towns, their guns rising like mountains, cruisers bristling with armaments, destroyers cutting through the waves with deadly intent. At first, disbelief washed over the crews. The enemy seemed so large, so impossible that it defied comprehension, and yet there was no time for hesitation. Within minutes, Evans and the captains of the other destroyers realized that they were the only line of defense between Kurita's fleet and the invasion forces on Leyte. The responsibility was immediate, personal, and terrifying. Kurita's fleet had the advantage in every measurable way. Their guns could strike from 25 miles away, well beyond the effective range of the American ships, which could not return fire until they were within 10 miles. Every calculation seemed to favor the Japanese, and yet Evans had never been one to think in terms of limitations. For him, survival depended not on matching the enemy shot for shot, but on boldness, unpredictability, and the willingness to engage where others would not. He understood that the Japanese, confident in their overwhelming firepower, would not expect the audacity of a destroyer charging headlong into the center of their formation. The geography of San Bernardino Strait itself added to the tension. The narrow waterway constrained movement, forcing ships into predictable paths and increasing the risk of concentrated fire. Evans knew that missteps would be deadly, but he also recognized the opportunity in the terrain. A well-timed attack, aggressive maneuvers, and coordinated torpedo strikes could disrupt even the most formidable fleet. He studied the charts, calculated angles, and mentally rehearsed every possible outcome, anticipating the enemy's movements while preparing his crew to act instinctively when the battle erupted. The psychological stakes were just as high as the tactical ones. Evans was acutely aware that the lives of every sailor aboard his ship, as well as those on the vulnerable escort carriers, rested on split-second decisions. Fear was natural, but he had trained his men to convert that fear into focus, to act decisively in moments when hesitation could mean death. His presence on the Johnston, calm yet intense, became the anchor for the crew. They watched him move along the deck, issuing orders, observing the horizon, adjusting plans with a clarity that seemed almost preternatural. In those moments, the destroyer was not just a ship, it was an extension of Evans' will, a living entity poised for the impossible. Meanwhile, the Japanese officers were operating under the assumption that they faced a minor skirmish. Kurita believed he could sweep through the San Bernardino Strait with little resistance, striking a decisive blow against what he assumed were lightly defended carriers. He had not expected audacious leadership, small ship ingenuity, or a crew willing to defy overwhelming odds. The overconfidence of the center force would become a critical factor in the unfolding confrontation, and Evans, like a predator sensing hesitation in his prey, was ready to exploit it. Taffy 3's initial awareness of the threat was chaotic. Communications hurried, orders shouted across decks, lookouts scrambling to confirm sightings. The contrast between the enormous Japanese ships and the tiny American vessels could not have been more stark. Yet in that chaos, Evans's voice carried clarity. He did not panic, he did not hesitate. He calculated the risk, made the decision, and set the course for action. His resolve created a ripple effect, stabilizing his crew's nerves and giving them the courage to move into a fight that most would have considered suicidal. It was in this moment, standing on the deck of the Johnston and observing the largest fleet the world had ever seen, that Evans's philosophy of leadership and courage would be tested. Years of preparation, discipline, and relentless training had led to this encounter. Every drill he had conducted, every lesson he had taught, and every act of calculated risk would converge in the next few hours. The San Bernardino Strait had become a crucible, a place where audacity would collide with overwhelming power, and where the name Ernest Evans would soon become synonymous with courage under fire. As the Japanese center force drew closer, the American sailors braced for impact. They were vastly outnumbered, outgunned, and in many ways outmatched in every measurable way. Yet they had a leader who refused to accept defeat, who believed that courage, daring, and tactical ingenuity could compensate for sheer size and firepower. Evans's decision-making in these critical moments would set the tone for the battle, demonstrating that heroism is not measured by the size of the fleet, but by the willingness to confront the impossible, and that even the smallest ship, under the right command, could challenge the mightiest adversary. In retrospect, the trap was not simply a product of miscalculation or oversight. It was a defining moment where the vulnerabilities of the American forces were laid bare, where the threat of annihilation loomed in every wave. And yet, it was also the moment that allowed extraordinary courage to emerge. Evans and the men of Taffy 3 were about to face a trial that would test not just their skill, but the very essence of bravery. The San Bernardino Strait, narrow and unforgiving, had become the stage for a confrontation that would enter history books, a place where audacity and resolve would collide with overwhelming force, and where the name Ernest Evans would soon become synonymous with courage under fire.
The moment of reckoning arrived as the Japanese center force closed in, the silhouettes of massive battleships and cruisers filling the horizon. For the men of Taffy 3, it was a sight unlike anything they had ever seen, a wall of steel and firepower that dwarfed their small destroyers. Yet there was no time to hesitate. Commander Ernest Evans had made a decision. He would engage, he would charge, and he would do everything in his power to protect the escort carriers, knowing that the lives of thousands of American troops on Leyte depended on the outcome. Evans' resolve was absolute. He understood that his 2,100-ton destroyer could not match the Japanese ships in a traditional fight. His guns could not outrange theirs, his armor could not withstand their shells, and his torpedoes, though deadly, were small weapons against such massive vessels. But Evans knew that audacity, speed, and surprise could level the playing field. He ordered full speed ahead, maneuvering the Johnston into position, closing the distance despite the deadly fire that would soon rain down. Every sailor aboard understood the risk. They were going into what seemed like certain death, but they trusted their captain completely, knowing that his courage would guide their actions. As the Johnston approached, the Japanese fleet opened fire. Massive 18-inch shells from the Yamato and heavy guns from the cruisers tore through the water around the destroyer, sending columns of spray into the air and shaking the ship with each impact. Yet Evans did not falter. He directed his crew to launch torpedoes, aiming for the largest battleships, and executed daring maneuvers designed to confuse and distract the enemy. The Johnston zigzagged through the waves, dodging incoming fire, while the crew worked with precision, loading guns, spotting targets, and repairing damage even as the ship trembled under bombardment. Evans' leadership in these moments was extraordinary. He moved along the deck, issuing orders, encouraging the men, and maintaining a calm intensity that inspired the crew to act decisively. He was the first to expose himself to danger, standing on the bridge and scanning the horizon, unafraid of the shells that splashed around him. His presence became a force multiplier. Sailors who might have panicked instead found focus, drawing on his courage to guide their own actions. Every torpedo fired, every gun aimed, and every evasive maneuver reflected not only training, but the extraordinary trust between captain and crew. The engagement quickly became a chaotic and brutal dance. The Johnston, small and nimble, darted between the Japanese cruisers and battleships, launching torpedoes and returning fire whenever possible. Smoke and explosions filled the air, masking positions and adding to the confusion of battle. The Japanese, surprised by the audacity of a single destroyer attacking directly, found themselves forced to react, adjusting their formations and slowing their advance. Evans's charge, seemingly reckless, achieved precisely what he intended: disruption. He had become a thorn in the side of the largest fleet they had ever commanded, drawing attention and fire away from the vulnerable escort carriers. Other American destroyers followed Evans's lead, but the Johnston was at the forefront, the embodiment of daring in the face of overwhelming odds. Evans ordered aggressive torpedo attacks, striking at cruisers and battleships alike. Though the destroyer could not survive a direct hit from the Yamato or the heavy cruisers, Evans's goal was to force the Japanese to maneuver defensively, to buy time for the carriers, and to create confusion in the enemy's ranks. The risk was immense, but the potential reward, the survival of the fleet and the troops on Leyte, depended on the outcome. The battle raged with an intensity that defies description. Explosions rocked the Johnston, fires broke out on deck, and casualties mounted. Yet Evans remained resolute, constantly reassessing the situation, issuing orders, and leading attacks. At one point, he personally directed a torpedo strike that severely damaged a Japanese heavy cruiser, a testament to his tactical skill and unflinching courage. Every act he performed reinforced the morale of his crew, and every action contributed to the overall defense of Taffy 3. The destroyer, though small, had become a weapon of extraordinary effectiveness, precisely because of the audacity and brilliance of its captain. Amid the chaos, Evans demonstrated an understanding of psychological warfare as well. He recognized that aggressive attacks from destroyers and destroyer escorts, seemingly reckless and suicidal, could give the impression of a larger force, causing hesitation and uncertainty among Japanese commanders. The suddenness and intensity of the attacks disrupted Kurita's plans, forcing him to question the size and disposition of the American forces. Evans had transformed a desperate situation into an opportunity, using boldness as a strategic weapon. The Johnston's crew performed feats of heroism throughout the engagement. Gunners fired relentlessly despite incoming fire. Damage control teams worked under extreme conditions to keep the ship operational, and every sailor understood that their actions mattered not just to their own survival, but to the success of the mission. Evans's leadership inspired extraordinary cohesion and courage. In those hours, the small destroyer embodied the principle that leadership is measured in action, that courage is contagious, and that a determined crew under an unflinching captain could face even the largest fleet and survive. Despite the overwhelming odds, Evans's actions had tangible effects. The Japanese formation became disorganized, their advance slowed, and their focus diverted from the escort carriers. The Johnston's aggressive maneuvers bought precious time for the Americans, allowing aircraft from the carriers to launch attacks and for other destroyers to join the fray. The battle, which might have been a straightforward massacre, had become a chaotic, contested engagement because of Evans's leadership and the courage of his crew. As the hours passed, it became clear that the engagement was taking a tremendous toll on the Johnston. The ship sustained heavy damage and casualties mounted among the crew. Yet Evans remained at the helm, making calculated decisions, pushing his men to maintain fire and continued attacks against overwhelming force. He embodied the principle that leadership is not simply giving orders, but sharing risk, facing danger alongside those you command, and inspiring them to act with courage beyond measure. Even in the face of near-certain destruction, Evans's resolve never wavered. He understood that the goal was not glory, but survival for the carriers and the troops on Leyte. Every daring maneuver, every torpedo fired, every evasive action contributed to a larger strategy that few could fully comprehend in the heat of battle. The Johnston, though battered, remained a symbol of defiance, a small destroyer whose courage challenged the mightiest fleet in history. In those intense hours, the impossible became reality. A single destroyer had charged 4 battleships, 6 cruisers, and multiple destroyers, achieving what seemed inconceivable: disruption, delay, and a demonstration that audacity could challenge overwhelming power. Evans's actions would not only save countless lives, but also cement his place in naval history as a leader of extraordinary courage, determination, and tactical brilliance. The battle had tested every skill, every lesson and every ounce of courage the Johnston and its crew possessed, and they had answered with heroism that would be remembered for generations.
The battle was over, but the cost had been immense. The USS Johnston, the small destroyer that had charged into the largest fleet Japan had ever assembled, lay battered and heavily damaged. Casualties were high, and the ship itself was no longer capable of continuing the fight. Yet the courage displayed by Commander Ernest Evans and his crew had turned what could have been a catastrophic defeat into a tactical victory, buying invaluable time for the escort carriers and saving countless lives on Leyte. Evans himself had paid the ultimate price. In the maelstrom of battle, he had been mortally wounded, his body a testament to the bravery and selflessness that had defined every action he had taken that day. The aftermath of the battle off Samar revealed the extraordinary impact of Evans' decisions. The Japanese center force, despite its overwhelming superiority in firepower and size, had been disrupted and delayed. Kurita, confused by the aggressive attacks of the American destroyers and destroyer escorts, ultimately chose to withdraw. The audacity of Evans' actions, along with the courageous stand of Taffy III, had altered the course of the engagement. The escort carriers survived, their aircraft continued to support operations on Leyte, and thousands of American troops ashore were spared from a potentially devastating attack. It was a victory forged not through numbers or firepower, but through bravery, leadership, and relentless determination. Evans's legacy was cemented in the history of the U.S. Navy. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, becoming the first Native American in the Navy to receive this highest recognition for valor. The citation highlighted his extraordinary heroism, noting that he had fearlessly directed his ship into the center of the enemy formation and gallantly gave his life in the defense of his country. These words captured only a fraction of what had occurred, yet they immortalized the courage and sacrifice of a man who had refused to retreat, who had faced the impossible with unwavering resolve. Stories from surviving crew members further illustrate the character and impact of Evans' leadership. They recounted moments when, even after sustaining serious damage, he continued to direct the ship, coordinate attacks, and maintain morale. Sailors remembered the clarity of his commands, his presence on the bridge amid explosions, and the calm determination that inspired them to act decisively in moments of extreme danger. Evans's ability to remain composed under fire and to instill courage in others defined his heroism as much as his tactical decisions. The Johnston herself became a symbol of extraordinary valor. Though ultimately lost, her actions demonstrated that small ships, guided by audacious leadership, could challenge and disrupt the most powerful forces. Naval historians often describe the battle off Samar as one of the most remarkable episodes of naval warfare in history, and the Johnston stands at the heart of that story. Her engagement exemplifies how courage, ingenuity, and decisive action can offset numerical and technological disadvantages, leaving a legacy that inspires generations of sailors and strategists alike. Beyond the immediate tactical impact, Evans's story resonated deeply within the broader narrative of World War II. It highlighted the role of individual initiative, the importance of leadership under pressure, and the extraordinary courage required to face overwhelming odds. The battle off Samar and Evans's actions in particular became a touchstone for discussions of heroism, resilience, and the human capacity to confront danger with clarity and resolve. Scholars, military leaders, and historians continue to study the engagement for lessons in leadership, strategy, and the psychology of combat, noting that the principles demonstrated by Evans remain relevant even in modern warfare. Evans' heritage also added an important dimension to his legacy. As a man of Cherokee and Creek ancestry, he broke barriers and demonstrated the contributions of Native Americans to the United States military. His courage and leadership challenged stereotypes and inspired pride among indigenous communities, highlighting the vital role they played in defending the nation during a time of global conflict. Evans's story is remembered not only for his tactical brilliance and bravery, but also for the example he set as a leader who transcended prejudice and proved the strength of character over background. In the years following the war, the heroism of Evans and the men of Taffy 3 was celebrated in books, documentaries, and historical analyses. James D. Hornfisher's The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors recounts the engagement with vivid detail, emphasizing the courage, improvisation, and determination displayed by Evans and his crew. Naval archives, action reports, and first-hand accounts preserve a rich record of the events, memorizing the memory of a battle where audacity triumphed over overwhelming odds. Each story, each recollection, reinforces the extraordinary nature of the engagement and the lasting impact of Evans' leadership. Today, the Battle off Samar serves as a powerful lesson in courage, leadership, and sacrifice. The actions of a single destroyer and its captain remind us that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, determination and bravery can alter the course of events. Evans's willingness to place himself and his crew in harm's way exemplifies the highest ideals of military service, showing that heroism is defined not by size, resources, or certainty of success, but by the courage to act decisively when it matters most. Ernest Evans' name has become synonymous with bravery under fire. Monuments, memorials, and naval honors commemorate his actions, ensuring that his story continues to inspire new generations. Sailors who follow in his footsteps draw lessons not only from his tactical skill, but from his unwavering commitment to his crew, his mission, and his country. The Medal of Honor, posthumously awarded, stands as a permanent recognition of the extraordinary sacrifice and leadership he demonstrated, a symbol of heroism that transcends time and circumstance. The final moments of the battle, with the Johnston heavily damaged and Evans mortally wounded, encapsulate the essence of his character. He faced the greatest odds imaginable with calm courage, relentless focus, and complete dedication to those he commanded. His life and actions illustrate the profound impact one individual can have on the course of history, proving that leadership is as much about character and resolve as it is about strategy and firepower. Evans's story is not just a tale of naval warfare, it is a timeless lesson in courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of human determination. In remembering Ernest Evans and the USS Johnston, we honor more than a battle. We honor the principles they embodied. Courage in the face of fear, leadership in the face of chaos, and selflessness in the face of danger remain guiding examples for all who serve. The Battle off Samar, one of the most remarkable naval engagements in history, serves as a testament to the extraordinary bravery of men who refused to retreat, who faced impossible odds, and who, through their actions, ensured that the fight for Leyte and for freedom would continue.